My name is Harper Donnelly. I'm 28 years old. 7 years ago, I missed the dream internship interview that could have changed my entire career because my parents needed the car for my sister's nail appointment. On the morning it happened, my father stood in front of the garage and said, "Sabrina's appointment is at 10. Yours can wait." My mother added, "It's just an internship, Harper. Priorities." I stood there with my portfolio shaking in my hands, watching them back out of the driveway without me. Then my sister rolled down the window and said one thing I never forgot. What she said that morning would come back to her in ways she never saw coming. And when my parents finally learned the truth 7 years later, our entire family didn't just break, it collapsed. If you're watching this right now, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. But first, let me take you back to the beginning of being invisible in my own family. I need you to understand something about my family before I tell you what happened that morning. We weren't poor. We weren't uneducated. We looked perfectly normal from the outside. My father, Dennis Donnelly, worked as a regional sales manager for a building supply company outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Steady paycheck, a house in a decent subdivision, 2 daughters, a minivan in the driveway. On paper we were fine. But inside that house there was a system and I was never on the winning side of it. My sister Sabrina was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment she could talk, my parents treated her like the fragile one, the one who needed protecting, the one whose feelings mattered more than anyone else's schedule. She wasn't especially driven or especially talented, but she had a way of making everything about herself feel urgent. And my parents had spent her whole life training themselves to respond to that urgency immediately. If I asked for something I got, "We'll see." If Sabrina asked for something, my mother dropped whatever she was doing. I got a bike for my 12th birthday used from a neighbor's garage sale. Sabrina got a brand new one 2 years later, plus a matching helmet and basket because, as my mother put it, she's more particular about things looking nice. By the time I hit high school, I understood the arithmetic of that house perfectly. Sabrina's comfort came first. My effort came last. I got a part-time job at a pharmacy in Concord, North Carolina at 16, because my parents said it would build character. Sabrina didn't work a single day of high school and nobody ever suggested she should. I threw myself into academics instead, the one place I felt like effort might actually be rewarded fairly, even if it was never rewarded at home. I didn't know yet just how far my parents were willing to go to protect Sabrina's comfort, even at the cost of the one opportunity I'd worked hardest for. That answer was still years away, arriving on a morning that started with something as small and as ordinary as a nail appointment. College didn't change the arithmetic of that house. It just relocated it. I got into a strong business program at UNC Charlotte on a partial academic scholarship I'd fought for entirely on my own, covering about half my tuition. The rest I made up through loans, a part-time job at a campus bookstore, and every summer, unpaid work at my father's building supply company back home. That arrangement started the summer after my freshman year. My father needed help with inventory tracking and vendor scheduling, and rather than hire someone, he simply expected me to fill the gap. Family doesn't need to be paid like outside help, Harper. This is how you contribute while you're living under our roof during breaks. I organized shipping manifests, reconciled vendor invoices, and trained 2 seasonal hires, all without a single paycheck for 3 consecutive summers. Sabrina, meanwhile, drifted through a 2-year cosmetology certificate at a community college nearby, dropping out after 18 months to figure things out, never once asked to contribute anything at home. When she needed money for a new phone, my parents handed it over without discussion. When I needed $60 for a required textbook my financial aid hadn't fully covered, my mother sighed and said, "We're a little tight this month, sweetheart. Can you make do?" I did the math one night during my junior year, unable to sleep the way I always did when the resentment got too loud to ignore. 15 hours a week for 12 weeks, 3 summers running at North Carolina's minimum wage at the time. That put my unpaid labor for my father's company at just over $3,200 I'd given away for free, while Sabrina hadn't worked a single unpaid hour in her life. But the money was never really the point. The point was time and how casually mine kept getting spent on other people's convenience. Sabrina called constantly with what my mother framed as emergencies. Her ride fell through. Her friend drama needed mediating. And every time the solution was the same. Harper, can you run over there and help your sister sort this out? You're just better at handling things than she is. I drove across town more times than I could count during my junior year alone, missing study sessions, missing office hours with professors I badly needed to impress, all to fix problems that had nothing to do with me. I never once got a thank you that felt like it meant anything. I got, "You're a lifesaver," tossed off the way you'd thank someone for holding a door. By the spring of my senior year, I had applied to a highly competitive summer internship at a marketing analytics firm in Atlanta, the kind of opportunity that could realistically launch an entire career. I'd made it to the final round, an in-person interview scheduled for a Saturday morning, and I'd spent 6 weeks preparing obsessively, turning down every family obligation I possibly could to get ready. What I didn't know, sitting in my apartment that final week rehearsing answers in the mirror at midnight, was that my parents were already making plans for that exact Saturday, plans that had absolutely nothing to do with me and everything to do with a standing nail appointment. The interview was scheduled for Saturday, June 8th at 10 in the morning at the firm's regional office just outside Charlotte. It was the final round for a highly selective summer internship program at Bellcrest Analytics, a marketing data firm that placed maybe 15 students nationwide each year into paid positions that routinely turned into full-time job offers. Missed the interview and there was no rescheduling. Their program coordinator had made that explicitly clear in the confirmation email, in bold text I'd read at least a dozen times. All final round interview slots are fixed and cannot be moved under any circumstances. I had scheduled everything around that date for 6 weeks. I'd requested time off from my part-time job. I'd turned down 2 invitations from friends. I told my parents about it explicitly twice, once at Sunday dinner in May and again the Wednesday before at breakfast, where I said plainly, "I need the car Saturday morning. My interview starts at 10 and if I miss it there's no makeup slot. This internship could change everything for me." My mother had nodded at the time, distracted, scrolling through something on her phone. My father hadn't said anything at all, which I now understand should have worried me more than it did. That same week, I overheard part of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come downstairs late one night for water and found my parents in the kitchen, voices low. My mother was saying something about Sabrina's standing appointment at the nail salon needing to move to Saturday morning because the salon had a scheduling conflict earlier in the week. My father said, "We'll need the car free by 9:30 then. Sabrina's appointment runs until at least 11. I stood frozen on the stairs, my interview just 2 days away, listening to my own family plan around a manicure as though my final round interview simply didn't exist on their calendar at all. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself surely they wouldn't actually let a nail appointment collide with something this important. Not after I'd told them twice, not after 6 weeks of preparation. I went to bed that Thursday night trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. Friday evening, the night before the interview, I laid out my clothes, packed my portfolio and resume copies into a folder, and went to check my phone one last time before bed. That's when I noticed a text from my mother, sent nearly 2 hours earlier, that I'd somehow missed entirely. It read simply, "Need the car tomorrow morning for your sister. Hope that's okay." My stomach dropped in a way I recognized immediately, the same feeling I'd had years earlier watching Sabrina get comforted for skipping school while I sat there in silence. I called my mother immediately. She didn't pick up. I texted back, my hands shaking. "I have my interview tomorrow at 10. I told you about this twice. Please call me back." No response came that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my portfolio folder sitting on the nightstand beside me, And something told me that whatever happened the next morning was going to be far worse than a simple scheduling conflict. I woke up at 7 even though the interview didn't start until 10 because I hadn't really slept. I showered, dressed in the one blazer I owned, packed my folder, and walked downstairs at 8 to find the kitchen already in motion. My mother was hunting for her keys on the counter, purse already on her shoulder, dressed like she was heading out the door imminently. "Mom, I need the car. My interview's at 10. I have to be there by 9:45 to check in." She glanced up, barely pausing. "Sabrina's appointment got moved to 9:30 this morning, sweetheart. The salon called last night and it was the only slot they had. We really can't miss it, they only take her this early once a month." "I told you about my interview twice," I said, my voice climbing despite myself. "This is the final round. There's no rescheduling. If I miss it, the internship is gone completely. It's just an internship, Harper. You can apply again next year. Sabrina's appointment can't just be pushed back." My father walked in from the hallway at that exact moment, already holding the car keys, jingling them slightly like it was nothing at all. "Morning, kiddo. Big day for your sister, her stylists booked solid otherwise." "Dad, I need the car. My interview is in less than 2 hours." He looked at me the way you'd look at someone asking for something slightly unreasonable. "Harper, we only have the one car working right now. Your mother's needs a new battery. You understand, Sabrina's been looking forward to this appointment all week." "I've been looking forward to this internship for 6 weeks, I said. "This isn't optional. This determines the entire trajectory of my career." That's when Sabrina walked in from the living room, already dressed, hair pulled back, scrolling through her phone like the entire morning was already decided in her favor. She glanced up just long enough to say, "Relax, Harper, it's just an interview. You can always apply somewhere else next summer." "I'm not asking you to skip your appointment, Sabrina. I'm asking for a ride to my interview first and then you can go." She rolled her eyes, already heading toward the door. "That doesn't even make sense timing-wise. We're already running late as it is." I looked at my mother, purse still on her shoulder, keys already retrieved from the counter. I looked at my father standing by the door. I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 8:15. I had exactly 90 minutes to get to that interview, and every single adult in that house was treating my future like a scheduling inconvenience beneath a standing manicure. "Please," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Please just drop me off first. It's 15 minutes out of your way, that's it." My mother's expression didn't soften at all. What she said next wasn't loud and it wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was completely, chillingly calm, the kind of sentence that tells you exactly where you stand in a family, and it's a sentence I have never once been able to forget even 7 years later. "Harper," my mother said, adjusting her purse on her shoulder, "you get one interview like this and suddenly the whole household has to rearrange itself. Sabrina's appointment took 2 weeks to book. You'll figure something out. You always do." That sentence landed harder than anything she'd said to me in years, because it wasn't cruelty, it was indifference, delivered so casually she was already walking toward the door before she finished the last word. My father followed behind her, calling over his shoulder, "We'll be back around noon. There's cereal if you're hungry." I stood in that kitchen at 8:20, 85 minutes from an interview I now had no way to reach, watching my family walk out to the one working car like nothing unusual was happening at all. I called a rideshare app with shaking hands, praying the fare wouldn't wipe out the $40 in my checking account. The nearest driver was 32 minutes away in a low-coverage part of the suburb. Even if the car arrived instantly, I'd have no realistic way to make check-in by 9:45. I called the firm's front desk at 8:40, my voice cracking as I explained I might be late due to a transportation emergency. The receptionist was sympathetic but firm. "I'm so sorry, our final round slots really are fixed. I can pass along a message, but I don't have authority to change the schedule." I sat down on the porch steps outside, my portfolio folder still clutched in my lap, and watched the driveway sit empty where our car should have been. By 9:50 I knew for certain the window had closed completely. I hadn't even made it out the front door. At noon my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with an Atlanta area code. I almost let it go to voicemail assuming it was spam, but something made me answer. It was the internship program coordinator herself, a woman named Ms. Castellano, calling to follow up on the message the receptionist had passed along, since my file had already been flagged as a no-show for the scheduled slot. "I understand this is difficult," she said, her voice careful, "but I do want to let you know something before you go in case it changes how you want to handle this on your end." She paused for just a moment before continuing, and whatever she said next was about to determine whether that single missed interview would define the rest of my summer, or whether there was still a door left open that I hadn't even considered. Ms. Castellano explained that while the missed interview slot itself couldn't be recovered, Bellcrest Analytics occasionally kept a short waitlist of highly qualified candidates who'd experienced documented scheduling conflicts, and that if I could submit a written explanation along with supporting materials within 48 hours, she'd personally forward my file to the hiring committee for consideration if any waitlist spots opened before the summer cohort started. It wasn't a guarantee. It was a long shot. But it was something. A door left slightly open. "I'd need everything by Monday morning," she said. "I can't promise it'll lead anywhere, Harper, but your application materials were strong enough that I don't want to lose you over a scheduling issue." I thanked her, hung up, and sat on that porch step for a long time, my mind moving faster than it had all morning. I thought about the text message my mother had sent the night before, time-stamped almost 2 hours before I'd seen it. I thought about the call I'd made to the firm's front desk at 8:40, which they'd likely have logged. I thought about writing down in detail exactly what had happened that morning, the moved appointment, the missing keys, my mother's voice telling me I'd figure something out. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and started writing. Not for my parents. For the hiring committee. I documented everything factually without embellishment, because I understood even then that the truth alone would be damning enough. I attached the screenshot of my mother's late-night text. I attached the timestamp of my call to the front desk. I submitted it Sunday night, less than 24 hours later, with steady hands and a strange, cold clarity I hadn't expected to feel. My parents got home from the salon that Saturday around 1 in the afternoon, Sabrina flashing a fresh set of acrylics at the kitchen table. Nobody asked me how the interview went. Nobody asked at all. I finally said it myself, standing in the doorway. I missed it. I never made it there. My mother's face flickered with something that might have been guilt, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "I'm sure there'll be other internships, sweetheart. It's not the end of the world." Sabrina, admiring her nails under the kitchen light, said, "See, told you it wasn't that big a deal," and walked past me toward the stairs like the conversation was already over. That was the moment something in me finally, permanently closed. Not with anger, not with a scene, just a quiet, absolute understanding that nothing I built in that house would ever be treated as real until it directly benefited someone else. I didn't announce anything. I didn't argue. I went upstairs that same night, pulled my old duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes for a week. My laptop. The folder with my waitlist submission. $110 in cash I'd saved from tips at the bookstore. I didn't know yet whether that waitlist submission would actually work, whether a spot would open before the summer cohort started, or whether I'd just spent my last shot on nothing. All I knew, standing in that room zipping up a bag while my family admired a manicure downstairs, was that I was leaving that house, and I had absolutely no idea it would be 7 full years before I set foot in it again. I left the following morning before anyone else woke up, took a bus to my friend Priya's apartment near campus, and slept on her couch for 9 days while I waited to hear back on the wait list. Priya never asked too many questions. She just handed me a blanket the first night and said, "Stay as long as you need." Ms. Castellano called on a Wednesday afternoon, 9 days after I'd submitted my materials, an email and a follow-up call I must have replayed 15 times before it fully registered. A spot had opened unexpectedly when another candidate withdrew, and given my documented circumstances and strong interview file from the earlier written round, the committee had approved bringing me in for a phone interview instead of requiring a second in-person visit. I did that phone interview from Priya's kitchen table 2 days later, and by that Friday I had the offer. A paid summer internship at Bellcrest Analytics starting in 3 weeks. It wasn't the internship I'd originally applied for on paper, but it was the same firm, the same program, and the same door I'd thought had closed forever on that porch step. I finished my final semester of college that following spring, walked at graduation with almost no family present, my grandmother the only one who showed up, sitting alone in the audience holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia 3 weeks after graduation, mostly because the internship had turned into a full-time entry-level analyst offer, $38,000 a year, benefits included. I packed everything I owned into a rented sedan and drove 5 hours south with $160 in my checking account and absolutely no plan beyond surviving the first month's rent. The first year in Atlanta was brutal in ways I hadn't fully prepared for. I worked long hours, ate cheap food, and called my parents maybe twice in 12 months, both times briefly, both times circling back somehow to updates about Sabrina, who had drifted into a retail job at a mall kiosk that lasted 5 months before she was let go for what my mother vaguely described as a scheduling misunderstanding. I threw myself into learning everything I could about the analytics side of the business in the evenings, using every free training resource the company offered that almost nobody else on staff bothered to use. Within 18 months, I'd been moved onto the firm's client strategy team, and by the time I finished my second year in Atlanta, I had something no one in my family had ever handed me. A reputation entirely my own, built without a single hour of help. I applied for a promotion to senior strategist that same year and got it 40 minutes into an interview I'd prepared for obsessively. My supervisor, a sharp, plain-spoken woman named Renata Voss, pulled me aside afterward and said, "You work like someone who's trying to prove something. What's the story there?" I told her only part of it, that I'd had a setback once and didn't plan on having another. What I didn't tell her, because I didn't fully understand it myself yet, was that the setback I'd survived was about to become the exact foundation for something far bigger than either of us could have predicted that afternoon. Something that would eventually put my own name on a door, and put my sister, of all people, on the other side of it. The promotion to senior strategist changed the trajectory of everything, though it took 2 more years before I fully understood how much. I specialized in brand analytics and market compliance almost by accident, after being assigned to untangle a data reporting mess for a client nobody else at the firm wanted to touch. It was detailed, painstaking work, and I was good at it in a way that quietly surprised the partners who'd underestimated me. By 2021, 4 years after I'd arrived in Atlanta with $160 and no plan, I was leading client strategy engagements independently, managing accounts worth more than my father's entire annual salary. In early 2022, Renata pulled me into her office and told me something that changed everything again. She was moving into a national leadership role and relocating within a year, and she wanted to know if I'd ever consider starting something of my own, because in her words, "You've outgrown being someone else's employee, Harper. You built half this division without anyone handing you the tools." I spent the next year building a business plan in every spare hour I had, meeting with potential clients quietly, securing a small business loan, and in October of 2023, I opened Donnelly Strategic Marketing, a boutique consultancy specializing in brand analytics and compliance reporting for mid-sized companies, with exactly 2 employees, myself and 1 junior associate I'd recruited from my old firm. I want to be honest about how frightening that first year was. I mortgaged nearly everything I'd saved into that company. I worked 80-hour weeks. But slowly, 1 client at a time, 1 referral at a time, Donnelly Strategic Marketing started to grow. By 2024, we'd expanded to 7 employees and moved into a proper office space in Atlanta's Midtown district, with my name etched into the glass door in simple black lettering. I remember standing in front of that door the day the sign went up, thinking about the girl who'd sat on a porch step outside Charlotte 7 years earlier, watching a car pull out of the driveway without her. I kept my personal life quiet during those years. I visited home exactly twice, both for brief obligatory holidays, keeping the conversations shallow and short. Sabrina, meanwhile, had drifted through 4 more jobs since the internship, a hostess position, a brief attempt at becoming a fitness instructor she never certified in, a stint doing social media for a boutique that closed within the year. My mother described each attempt to relatives as though Sabrina were on the verge of something enormous, and each time within months, the story quietly disappeared. By the start of 2025, my firm had grown to 11 employees, a client roster that included 2 regional retail chains, and a reputation in Atlanta's marketing community that I had built entirely without a single dollar or hour of help from the family that once told me a nail appointment mattered more than my future. I had no idea, sitting in my office reviewing that year's hiring plan for a new client operations coordinator position, that the next application to land on my desk would carry a name I hadn't seen in almost 7 years. And that opening that file would be the moment everything I thought I'd left behind in Charlotte came walking straight back through my front door. It was a Tuesday morning in March of 2025, and I was at my desk reviewing applications for a client operations coordinator opening we'd posted 2 weeks earlier. We'd received just over 70 applications by then, and I was scrolling through them the way I did every morning, coffee going cold beside me, when a name near the bottom of the list stopped me completely. Sabrina Donnelly. I sat there for a moment, absolutely certain it had to be a coincidence, another Sabrina Donnelly somewhere in Georgia. But when I clicked into the file, the resume loaded and the photo attached to it was unmistakable, older, more polished, but unmistakably my sister. I scrolled down to her work history, and my stomach tightened before I'd even finished reading the first line. Client Operations Associate, Ferncrest Brand Group, Charlotte, North Carolina, listed for a period of nearly 3 years, spanning almost exactly the years I now knew she'd actually spent drifting between the hostess job, the failed fitness certification, and the boutique social media role that had lasted less than a year. Underneath it, a list of duties that read like something copied directly from a job description template. Managed vendor compliance documentation. Coordinated client reporting cycles. Improved account retention through proactive communication strategies. I searched Ferncrest Brand Group in North Carolina's business registry. Nothing. No such company existed or had ever existed in the state. My hands went still on the keyboard. I scrolled down to her references, half already knowing what I was going to find before I got there. First reference listed, Dennis Donnelly, description simply, former supervisor. My own father listed as a professional reference for a client operations job at a company that had never existed, for work that, as far as I could tell, sounded suspiciously close to the exact kind of vendor and inventory coordination work I had done, unpaid, for 3 summers running at my father's real building supply company, years before Sabrina had ever touched a spreadsheet in her life. I sat back in my chair, the applicant file still glowing on my screen, and felt something cold and clear settle over me, the same clarity I'd felt 7 years earlier sitting on that porch step watching the driveway sit empty. Our firm's hiring protocol required full employment verification on every finalist before any offer went out. No exceptions, a policy I had personally written into our onboarding procedures the year we opened. I had 2 options sitting in front of me. Recuse myself entirely, flag the conflict of interest, and hand the file to someone else on my team. Or follow protocol exactly the way I would for any other candidate and let the verification process reveal whatever it was going to reveal. I thought about the missing car that morning. I thought about the fresh set of acrylics at the kitchen table. I thought about my mother's voice telling me I'd figure something out, and my father telling me it wasn't that big a deal. I picked up the office phone and dialed the first number listed for Ferncrest Brand Group, and as it began to ring, I had absolutely no idea that the voice about to answer on the other end was going to confirm something far worse than I had even suspected. The number rang twice and then disconnected entirely, the flat, dead tone confirming what the business registry search had already told me. Ferncrest Brand Group didn't exist. I searched further, cross-referencing the exact address listed on Sabrina's resume, and found it belonged to a UPS mailbox rental store in Charlotte, the kind of address anyone could rent for $20 a month to make a fictional company look real on paper. I called my father's actual company next, the real building supply business outside Charlotte where I had answered phones and reconciled invoices for free 3 summers running. His longtime office manager, a woman named Colette who'd worked there since before I was born, picked up on the second ring. I gave her my professional title and explained I was conducting a standard employment verification for a candidate named Sabrina Donnelly. There was a long pause. "Harper, is that really you, honey?" Her voice softened and then shifted the moment she processed what I was actually asking. "Sabrina never worked here in any official capacity, sweetheart. You know that better than anyone. You were the one doing that inventory work every summer, not her." I asked her directly whether she was aware of any arrangement where my father might have agreed to serve as a reference for a job Sabrina had never actually held. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know anything about that specifically. But Harper, I remember exactly whose hands were on those vendor invoices, and it wasn't your sister's." I thanked her, hung up, and then dialed my father directly at his office line, not identifying myself right away, simply stating I was conducting a routine verification call for an applicant. "I'm calling to verify employment for Sabrina Donnelly," I said, "listed as a client operations associate at Ferncrest Brand Group in Charlotte, for approximately 3 years. Can you confirm those details as her former supervisor?" There was a pause on the line longer than I expected. "Yes, that's correct. She did excellent work. Very detail-oriented, very reliable." "And during that same period, did anyone else in your family perform similar vendor or client coordination duties at your company?" Another pause, this one longer still. "No. Just Sabrina." That was the lie that confirmed everything. As I had existed. I had been there, unpaid, for 3 full summers, doing exactly the kind of work now attributed to a sister who had spent that same window bouncing between a mall kiosk and an unfinished fitness certification. I still had old text messages from my mother asking me to cover for vendor deliveries. I had a shoebox of pay stubs that didn't exist because I'd never been paid at all. I had 7 years of silence that had just been broken by one confirmed, deliberate lie. I thanked my father, still without revealing who I was, and ended the call. I sat there for a long moment afterward, my hands steady in a way that almost surprised me. I wasn't shaking the way I had on that porch step 7 years earlier. I felt something closer to certainty. I wrote one line in Sabrina's applicant file. "Employment verification failed. Listed employer does not exist. Recommend in-person interview to address directly." Then I picked up my phone and scheduled that interview myself for the following Monday, with absolutely no idea that the moment my sister walked through our office door, she would have no idea at all whose name was on the glass above it. I scheduled Sabrina's interview through our standard applicant portal, the same way I would for anyone else. "Dear Sabrina, thank you for your application to the Client Operations Coordinator position at Donnelly Strategic Marketing. We would like to invite you for an in-person interview on Monday at 10 in the morning at our Atlanta office. You will meet with Harper Donnelly, founder and managing director, and Renata Voss, senior advisor." She replied within the hour. "Perfect, see you then." No recognition at all, not of the company name, not of mine, nothing. 7 years of near silence between us, and she genuinely hadn't connected the dots. I told Renata everything the day before, the fake company, the fabricated references, my father confirming the lie over the phone. She listened without interrupting, then said only, "You lead it. I'll sit in as a witness." Monday morning I sat in our conference room watching the lobby through the glass wall. At 9:58 Sabrina walked in wearing a fitted blazer, portfolio tucked under her arm, hair professionally styled, looking older and more composed than the version of her I remembered from that kitchen 7 years ago. She checked in at the front desk and I walked out to meet her myself. She looked up, saw my face and froze completely. Harper, what are you doing here? I own this firm, I said. Please follow me. She followed, visibly rattled, into the conference room where Renata was already seated. I took the center chair and gestured for her to sit across from us. Let's get started, I said, my voice calm. Walk us through your resume. The first few minutes were standard questions about software, about client management. Sabrina answered nervously but adequately. Then I leaned forward. I see you worked at Ferncrest Brand Group in Charlotte for nearly 3 years. Tell me about that role. Yeah, client operations, vendor coordination, reporting, that kind of thing. Small company but solid experience. I called to verify that employment last week, I said. There's no business registered under that name anywhere in North Carolina. The address on your resume is a mailbox rental store. I also called Dad's actual company. Colette still works there. She confirmed you never held a formal position doing that work. Sabrina's face drained of color. I helped out sometimes. Around the office. It counts for something. You did none of that work, I said. I did every hour of it for 3 summers unpaid while you were still figuring out cosmetology school. Every duty on this resume is my labor with your name attached to it. She started to argue, voice rising, when Renata's phone lit up on the table between us. A message confirming what our applicants signed consent to on every final round interview for client-sensitive roles. The entire conversation, every word of it, was already being recorded for our internal audit file, and Sabrina had signed that consent form herself, 3 days earlier, without reading a single line of it. Renata ended the interview formally a few minutes later, informing Sabrina that we could not move forward given the confirmed misrepresentation, and that the fabricated employment history would be noted in our internal hiring records. She left the building without saying another word to me, and I didn't walk her out. The call started that evening. My mother first, her voice sharp through the phone. How could you humiliate your sister like that? In front of a potential employer? Do you have any idea what you've done to her? I let it go to voicemail. My father called an hour later, his message shorter and colder. This is a family matter, Harper. You didn't need to make it a workplace incident. Call me back. I didn't call either of them that night. The next morning, my mother sent a long text ending with, "Your sister is devastated. Fix this." I read it once and set the phone face down on my desk. 2 days later, I finally called my father, mostly because there was one thing I needed to say directly. I asked him plainly why he'd lied on that verification call, confirming a job that never existed. He was quiet for a long moment. I didn't think anyone would actually check, Harper. Your sister asked me to help her. I didn't think it would matter. It mattered 7 years ago too, I said. The morning you took the car. He didn't have an answer. The silence stretched almost 30 seconds before he simply said, "I have to go," and hung up. I haven't heard from Sabrina directly since that Monday morning. My mother calls occasionally, conversations that stay carefully on the surface, never once circling back to what actually happened in either direction 7 years apart. It's been almost a year now since that Monday morning in the conference room. Donnelly Strategic Marketing has grown to 15 employees. We brought on a new client operations coordinator that spring, someone with an honest resume and real references, and the role has nothing to do with what happened before it. I heard through my grandmother that Sabrina is working the front desk at a salon now, outside Charlotte. I don't know much beyond that, and I've stopped asking. My father sent a text on my birthday this year for words, "Thinking of you, kiddo." I didn't answer right away. I'm still not sure if I answered out of forgiveness or just habit. I think about that morning in the kitchen sometimes, the fresh manicure, the portfolio folder I never got to use. For years I believed missing that interview meant I wasn't capable of the life I wanted. It took me a long time to understand it was never about capability at all. It was about a family that had already decided long before that Saturday whose morning mattered and whose didn't. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand what they did that morning or in the years of silence that followed it. But I've stopped waiting for that understanding to arrive before I let myself move forward. I built a firm without their permission once already. I know exactly how to keep building without it. If you've ever been the one expected to wait, to give, to disappear quietly while someone else got the comfort, I hope this reached you today. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. There are more stories like this coming. Thank you for listening.